Are you done?
Are you recording?
Yeah.
You're recording me blowing my nose?
Restarted.
Not yet.
Oh my god.
Let them listen to me blowing my nose.
No.
I'm done. Let's do it. In it. I missed the bin again, twice. For like
Oh my god.
a feet away.
Can we just start?
Okay. Oh, can't say that. Whoops. Budget. We'll bleep that out. Have you settled down?
Yeah, you can't say that.
I can't say that. I know. We'll bleep that out. Hello. Once I've gone through my giggling fit, I will tell you that we're back with Life's a Pitch.
Episode 2.
Episode 2, man. We're here. Episode 2. Episode 2.
Excitement.
I can't believe it.
Lots of like testosterone and stuff.
No testosterone.
No?
Excitement, but no testosterone.
Sorry.
Or a little bit, I don't know, but I don't know what we're doing. I was about to swear there again.
Can we just start? Let's get on with it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Hello, welcome back to episode 2 of Life's a Pitch. Before we begin, I just want to take out the time to say thank you to everyone who's listened and everyone who's taken the time to give us feedback. And, you know, some of it good, some of it bad, but that's okay because that's how you learn, that's how you get better. It really, really means a lot and we really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. So today we have our first ever guest, and it's someone who we think we loved having him on. He was amazing. He was funny. He laughed at our jokes, even the shit ones.
Which no one really does, really.
I swore again. Gonna have to beep that out too. But George, if you are listening, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna stop rambling now because you're probably sick of my voice.
Good idea.
But
I am.
Yeah, but the next voice you hear will be mine again. But it will be the podcast, so we have to beat that swearing. We need to work on our swearing.
Yeah, we can't
censoring. Without further ado, here comes the jingle.
Jingle.
Right, we're back. Hello, episode 2 of Life's a Pitch, coming to you from the Student Centre at Bournemouth University. Today, I'm delighted to say that we've got a guest on.
Our first ever guest.
First ever.
There's no pressure there.
No pressure.
Oh my word.
So we're delighted to be joined by what can only be described as a creative heavyweight in Bournemouth. Someone who, I'm really excited to have you on. George Beverly. Hello, George.
Hello there. Thank you very much for having me. Creative heavyweight, is that referring to my weight? Or my career? Or the grey hairs on my hair?
Like the Muhammad Ali of creatives.
Wow. I've got a lot to live up to.
No pressure.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So at this point, we'd normally introduce our guests, but I don't feel like I do you enough justice. So I'll let you hear it from the man himself. Tell us a bit about yourself.
A bit about me, blimey. Okay, so you won't see it because this is a podcast, but I've got lots of grey hair. So I started off in the ad business in 1990, I'm afraid to say. Wow. So I was... Not that long ago. So I went straight to London from doing a graphic design course, actually, at Suffolk College of Art back in the day. So I did graphics, and then I ended up somehow being a copywriter at Leo Burnett's, and then quickly realised that I was not a very good copywriter and got fired. So then switched the fence to become an art director. I then went on and did the agency circuit in London. I then jumped into direct marketing towards the sort of late 90s. And then from the 2000s upwards, it was getting a grip of digital, getting a grip of direct marketing and data, which was getting big at that time, and then moved down to Bournemouth 2003 to buy into an agency around here. And then jumped around a bit after that. I started doing some lecturing, started doing some consultings and some speaking. And up to the present day, I'm a founding partner of Think, Create, Do, which I suppose we like to call an innovation consultancy, if there is such a thing. But we work with brands on a more consultancy basis now. Yeah. So it's been an evolving career, starting off doing one thing and ending up doing the other.
Okay. You said you moved down to Bournemouth in 2003.
Yes.
did anything in particular attract you to Bournemouth? Did you sense the growth in the industry, or was there something specific about Bournemouth that caused you to come?
Apart from the beach, obviously.
Apart from the beach.
Well, you can't ignore the lifestyle element to it. I mean, that was part of it. But at that time, Bournemouth University and what is now Arts University Bournemouth were beginning to have a pretty good reputation. And where I was at my career at that time, I could see that nurturing young talent within agencies was actually a key to success. And if you didn't do that, we'd end up with lots and lots of old people in agencies. So the relationship with the universities and the local area was part of the reason why I came down.
Okay.
And it did take me a while to gestate those relationships, but they are now, well, I'm here, so it must have worked.
So you've been in Bournemouth for quite some time now. How would you say you would sum up the creative industry in here? What excites you about it? What's your...
Yeah, it's hugely exciting because we have to accept that we're smaller than Bristol, Manchester, London, Paris, but that doesn't mean we're any less better. So the fact that we're smaller and we have to work harder because there's a lesser talent pool, I'd say that the industry and the community are probably slightly more engaged than they are anywhere else. And again, me being here talking to you today is demonstration of that.
Sure.
So more engaged, smaller, probably with a greater propensity to collaborate.
Right.
Not so much holding everything in, but sharing more.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. Of course, I would always say to people, you've got to go to London because it's a regional, national, international centre of excellence. Right. It's bigger, so you have pockets, I think, of communities and engagement because it's such a big place. Sure. And you could never work your way around those. Right. But in Bournemouth, I think you can pretty much get to know people really quickly.
Yeah. We talked a bit about your sort of career in advertising and sort of everything like that. What would you say, what is your opinion on the state of advertising in general currently, looking at the bigger picture?
Wow, that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Well, we get to the crux of it.
It's a great question because I think that for some time now the ad industry has been acknowledging secretly to itself that it's living on borrowed time. The way that it operates, the way that it charges its fees, the way it works with clients has changed and has been changing for some years. I think now, I'm pointing to one of my cue cards, if you look at the rise of other channels, digital, Facebook, programmatic stuff that's happening, the control is now not with the agencies like it used to be, the control is with the consumers. Right. So actually the ad industry is having to shift its position from being guardian of purporter of messages through paid channels to we've got to coexist with other types of beasts as well in order to engage that consumer.
How do you think that's going to play out going forward? Agencies having to adapt to this massive change.
Well, I think let's look at that from another point of view. If you looked at the acquisition trail of some of the big agency networks, you'll see what they're buying. If you look what's on Sir Martin Sorrell's shopping list, you normally get a good idea of what's happening in the industry. Right. So he's beginning to buy up data shops, tech startups, those types of businesses. So agencies are seeing they can't make their money like they used to, and above the line fees and production fees and one big idea pushed out. They need to find other ways of driving growth and actually paying back the shareholders who give them money to invest in the first place. So agencies are finding themselves, it's almost death by 1,000 cuts. You need big group scale, which means you get smaller boutique creative or specialist shops that then start nipping at your heels.
Sure.
Right. And one thing, going back to when we were talking about Bournemouth in particular, I wanted to ask you whether, since I know that you work as a guest lecturer at Bournemouth University at times.
Yes, I do.
Have you seen anything in the students, in particular at this university, that you think is maybe, I don't want to use the word special, but some special, unique characteristics of the students, particularly at this university, because of our course, that they can sort of offer to the advertising world in England and
sorry
abroad.
to interject there. It's completely off topic, but the way you go is, I love the way you're going. I don't want to use the word special, but then
I did use it, yeah.
So I'm thinking, right, I've got to big them up now, haven't I?
You don't have to say us, by the way. Is there a pressure?
No. Well, if you go back to what we spoke about just a moment ago, and that level of engagement between academia, students, and industry, because BU students are so plugged in, and I think they are encouraged to by lecturers and the institution overall, they tend to question, from what I've experienced, they tend to question what they learn in a lecture. They then go out and talk to someone in practice, if you like, and say, hey, look, I'm hearing this. Is that your experience? Does that work? So perhaps there's less of a jump from education into industry when they make it, because they kind of already know. So there's an inquisitiveness about the students here that I see. There's a curiosity about how they approach their work, which industry will love. That's what we want people to do. Be engaged, being curious, be challenging. And I think from what I've seen, the BE students have got that in spades. And I expect them to be, if I'm talking or lecturing, I expect them to say, oh, hold on, I don't really get this bit here. What do you mean by that? And that's what you want. You want people poking you, saying, I don't get that bit. I think it should be this. So, is that special enough? Sounds good to me.
Let's use unique.
Unique, thank you. Unique, right, okay.
Well, you said you got into the industry in fairly recently, in 1990.
Saving my blushes. Yeah.
I wanted to know, was there anything from growing up as a child, when you were in middle school, high school, what sort of got you into that zone of, I want to be what you are now?
In the business.
In the business.
Yeah, I suppose there were two things that I always remember about that time when I was at art school. And one of them was I was in London and I happened to see an amazing tube card, the little ads that you see at the top of the tube cards. And it was so simple, and it was an ad for the Samaritans, and it was just a black and white picture of a telephone, and the headline just read, wanted someone to operate this life support machine.
Oh, wow.
And it was so simple and clever. I looked at it and I was just thinking to myself, my word, that is so good. How the heck did someone think about that? And it's an ad that stayed with me. And it was the benchmark for me. I thought, wow, if I could ever produce anything as good as that, brackets, I haven't, ever, then I'd be going some. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was my dad's cousin at the time this always helps, doesn't it, happened to be group creative director at JWT in London at the time. So I'd go in and see him working on big accounts, Benetton, Disney, and there in his massive office in Berkeley Square in Mayfair, and all he'd have on his desk was just a load of magic markers and an A3 pad. And he'd just sit there and scribble. And I'd be in the corner and go, wow, that's just brilliant. How does this business function with just a set of pens and a pad? But then you quickly realise it's all about the brain operating the pens that go onto the pad. It was those two things.
Sure. So going along the lines of, working in ad agencies and working, JWT, big names, what 3 campaigns do you think you've seen over your career that make you think, I wish I'd been involved in that?
Oh, blimey. Top 3 campaigns.
Yeah, like for me, it definitely would have been, it's like something like Guinness Made of More. That's like up there.
Yeah.
One thing I'd love to have been involved in was, again, this is going to sound like an alcoholic, but Peroni and how they bring Italian lifestyle to beer, which I think is really unique, and like no one's done that.
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic, I promise. might want to have a drinking problem if you're listening. But yeah, stuff like that, which I think, that was totally unique, and it sets Peroni apart completely from other competitors. So what do you think you would like to...
So one campaign I always think about was Tango from Howard Henry, Shawcott Lurie, HHCL, back in the 90s, with the chap who runs up and slaps him in the face when he drinks a can of orange Tango. I mean, it was controversial at the time, but that agency, HHCL, when I was working, we were just coming into work on the Monday and saying, "Did you see that spot on TV? We're never going to be as good as that."
Yeah.
But what it did, it just made you think, my word, you can be irreverent, you can be humorous, you can be different with a relatively simple FMCG brand. So Tango is number one.
Right.
Number two, it always makes me think about it, but the Benetton outdoor campaigns, very controversial back in the 90s, which perhaps are a bit too explicit to explain on this podcast, but if you Google it, you'll see what I mean. But again, groundbreaking stuff. It was brave, it was challenging, it got talked about, it got column inches way beyond the media spend. So I've got to say something relatively modern, haven't I? I suppose the third one that I think was just so clever from a strategic point of view, as much as the execution, was the I think the drugs advisory campaign, Talk to Frank, which was just so smart at engaging the right level of consumer about a subject that actually people didn't really want to talk about, and whether or not you could use humour. It's not so much humour, maybe wit in that to get under the radar. I thought that was just brilliant. So I'd say those three leaped to mind straight away.
Okay, so would you be able to tell us some of the interesting projects that you're currently working on? Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got some covenants and NDAs that I perhaps need to adhere to, but it's funny, isn't it, that here we are talking about advertising, but actually some of the projects I've been working on recently aren't strictly ad projects as such, and that just shows how diversified I think you have to be these days. I've been working with a well-known crowdfunding platform. I'll plug it now, crowdfunder.co.uk. We've been helping them with...
Other crowdfunding platforms are available.
They are available, and I won't say anything more than that. So between myself and the rest of the guys at Think Create Do, we've been working with them on understanding them as a business and working out what their brand's all about and how to communicate that, and understanding the opportunities that type of platform can bring to not just people who fund projects, but for other brands to then get involved within it. I mean, that's a really interesting space to be involved in. That's one particular project. The other project that we could talk about in very sketchy detail would be...
We won't tell anyone.
Okay, you won't tell anyone.
Don't.
This is not leaving these four walls.
No, not at all.
Is working on excuse me, a launch for, and this is a launch for another big car brand. But the launch for a particular new model, which I can't talk about, is solely through digital. So this is not new, but it generally is unusual for a big car brand not to push out through mainstream media, i.e. board TV spots, posters, outdoor, etc. But this is all digital.
Right.
All some display stuff, some banner work, but mostly through social media. And mostly not pushing the product, but attributes about the audience that match the product, if you see what I mean. So, and this is something that you'll see lots and lots of examples of. But that is a very, doing a non-product ad is actually quite difficult, because what you do is you end up talking about the audience a lot, which is fine. But sometimes you need to then say, "Can you buy this, please?" So finding the blend between those two subtleties is really interesting. But that's something, and then we start talking about native advertising and bought content and all sorts of other stuff, which there is an element of that in the campaign. But I think that you'll see this as a trend where you'll just see the traditional bought media I think it will drop away. It's, I don't know the stats, but it feels like it's dropping away already. The purists will say, no, the 30-second spot is king. And then I'll say, I'm not really sure it is if you look at the stats against, YouTube and all sorts of other stuff like that. So,
But haven't they always said that though?
they have.
Wasn't it when TV came out, they said print was dead, and then when the internet came along, when YouTube came along, they said TV was dead.
And also with the 30-second spots, if you think about commercials that premiere during the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
they're only 30 seconds, they're worth 4.5 million or billion.
Yeah.
And their value is going up every single year.
Yeah.
And I guess it really depends though. I guess the normal one which you see on ITV or something like that might not be as effective anymore.
Yeah, I think you could be right. But the good point about the Super Bowl is it's not so much an ad, is it? It's actually an event.
That's true.
It's
Yeah.
building up
Huge.
so much activity before the ads actually aired. Everyone's talking about, I wonder what they're going to do on Super Bowl. And then all of a sudden it's this amazing event. So I can see the value to that because you're just driving a whacking load of audience to what is essentially a one-off.
Yep.
But when you're repeating and pushing sequential 30-second spots at people, I mean...
It's like Christmas in the UK, isn't it? A huge buzz around Christmas and Christmas ads in the UK.
Yeah, and then there's always disappointment at the end, isn't there?
Yeah.
People build up the John Lewis and Sainsbury's ads, and then at the end it's like, oh, I don't really like that one.
Yeah. It was
It's weird,
amazing. So I was at a conference last week, a copywriting conference here in Bournemouth.
Yep.
And I had a guy called Miles, who was the writer from Adam and Eve, who wrote last year's Christmas spot for John Lewis, The Man in the Moon.
Oh, The Man in the Moon, yeah.
And he talked us through his process of how they arrived at that script, which is brilliant.
Yep.
But then he said the amount of response he got on social media, which was, oh, why did you have a grumpy old bloke on a moon?
Yeah.
I could have written that. It's amazing how the industry perceives it to be a brilliant work of art, a masterful piece of communication. But the people on the outside are like,
The
oh,
people
that's
that
rubbish.
matter.
Yeah.
Thinking, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay. So I've loved chatting to you for the past half an hour. How long has it been? 20 minutes? Half an hour?
20 minutes. Yeah.
So I feel like we've got to know you quite well. But give us your elevator pitch.
Oh, blimey.
So you've got 10 seconds. I'm timing you. I don't have a digital watch, but wait.
I have a
Can
phone, I
you
do it.
count me in after 3?
Okay, here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm George. I can draw, understand spreadsheets, do a bit of writing, can do a bit of editing. I can also wash cars, and I'll come round and cook you a meal if you can't give me enough money to do the 1, 2, and 3.
Time.
How was that?
Very,
Did
very impressive.
Did I make it?
Very
You did,
impressive. You
you
added cooking, you added drawing,
Cleaning cars, I'm sold.
cleaning cars.
Yeah, I love it.
Love it.
It's the ultimate T-shaped person, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant.
I think one question that we both wanted to know is that from the time you started, right back in 1990 up until now,
We're really coming back to
all the-
1990, aren't we?
yeah, sorry, all the things that you've learned.
Yeah.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you started off?
Right, okay.
And you can't answer the cliche.
No. There is one thing that I saw someone talk about when I was in my sort of late 20s, and I was, this is a very intoxicating business advertising, isn't it? You sometimes feel like, oh my word, you think you get built up and you think, I'm really good at this. Someone gives you some more money, someone gives you an award, and you think you're great, and you develop some kind of semi-messiah complex, always dangerous. But I read somewhere at that time in the kind of late 90s where someone wrote a piece, I think it was in Campaign, that said, you must get out of the industry. You must experience outside of the industry to then see back in, really see it from the consumer's point of view. Because it can be a very introverted view that we all have of this industry. So if I'd have known then that would really help me, I would have done more of it.
Right.
So what I mean is, of course, go to industry conferences, learn about stuff, talk to people, but also listen to what's going on with the normal people who buy these brands that you do work for. See how they buy it. See how they talk about TV ads. They don't look at the intricacies. They'll talk in broad brushstrokes, like, that was rubbish. Oh, he's that bloke out of so-and-so. Well, I could have written that. Oh, what a load of rubbish. So think about the recipients of the communication, and I think it will help you make more informed decisions about the work you do. If I'd have done more of that, I don't know if I would have been better, but I would have been more equipped to make the right decisions on the work.
Okay.
I call it the mum test. You must know this. If you're struggling with a piece of work or thinking, you give it to your mum.
Yeah.
Mum, what do you see about this? And she'll say, oh, it's stupid. She'll give you a very visceral reaction,
Right.
but then you've got to think about that because it'll help you inform.
I don't think I could do that.
You might-
3 years, I don't think my mum knows what I do.
she still doesn't know what I do.
I just work with computers. That's it. Well, I get what you were saying about the mum test, but
Yeah.
I do that all the time with family members, with brothers, because they are the people you're advertising to.
Yeah.
Like I do think sometimes as advertisers, potential advertisers in our case, there is a sort of bubble that we live in.
Yeah.
And Dave Trott, I think, summed it up perfectly, is people in Shoreditch advertise to other people in Shoreditch.
Yeah.
But he advertises to, well, I don't think he said he advertises to, but the point is we're advertising to people outside of Shoreditch, outside the bubble.
Yeah.
Like the normal people who, have a 9-to-5 job and take their kids to school, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what my point is with this.
It's like putting out material, isn't it? Trying out material, trying out new ideas, seeing what people think.
I guess so.
And then turning that into actual work.
And also, I mean, Dave Trott is brilliant, and he's been banging that drum for years. And was deeply unpopular in back in the day for talking in those terms, but he's right. But also, even the great Paul Arden, he of Saatchi fame, he once said, well, I think he says in his book, sometimes the client might just be right. The customer might just be right. It's not you sitting in a room talking about how great the headline is. It's about how that person interprets it on the street. When are they acting on it at the point of consideration? That's the key thing. But deeply unpopular, which is why I say to you, step outside the bubble.
Right.
And then be prepared to go, God, you know what I just wrote or produced is never going to work with it. Let's go back to square one.
Very interesting.
I think we've done quite a bit of asking you questions and getting your opinions on stuff. Is there anything that you would like to talk about?
Well, I'm intrigued. I mean, I've got a series of cue cards, as I said. I mean, this is
Well prepared.
a listening medium, but our listeners can't see that. But one of I've written down what I think are sort of pertinent points, and some of which we've discussed already. I suppose one of the things I would like to ask you is, and I was talking to the great Dave Burse at Conference Silicon Beach last week, and we spoke about the lack of diversity in agencies.
Right.
And in one of the speeches, well, I can't remember who said it, but she said, the agency world, the creative agency world is male, pale, and stale. So we've got lots of white middle-class people, present company accepted, says he waving his hands. But what about ethnicity? What about women? What about disability? What about bringing in all the other representative people from who we sell to and get them in agencies? What do you guys think about that? Big silence. Come on.
Put us on the spot. But for me, I think advertising, I didn't really know about it until I got to university. I got to late college. So, if I had to make a choice, I think it's about reaching children, at a young age and telling them, look, this is a pathway you can go down. Like, this, just going into schools and maybe giving a talk, or maybe, this is why I like what Gray did with the Kidsania in Westfield. Giving kids the chance to experience what it is to make an ad, because I think that's the way we need to go. It's because once you get to people at university or like high level, they've already decided where they want to go. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it, but maybe we should be going into schools and giving our time and talking to these kids and getting them to chat, getting them in the know about what advertising is. I mean, for me, my parents were, once they got over the fact that I wasn't going to be traditional, a doctor, lawyer, or teacher, I think they're quite receptive of what it is I'm going to do, and hopefully how much money I'm going to make, which is what my dad always asked me. But so I think it's just about reaching kids at a younger age, and that will hopefully increase the number of people that we have coming. Well, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but the sort of the diversity of the industry. You just have to reach them at a younger age rather than when they've got to 18, 19 and 20 and when they've made the decisions. And I feel like I've been talking too much now, so I'm going to...
DJ, any thoughts?
I think that, well, growing up in a fairly similar sort of system to how he grew up, with my parents sort of wanting me to do certain things. I mean, to be fair, my parents were quite liberal and they quite sort of let me do what I want. But I had no idea I was going to do advertising in uni. I had my heart set on doing visual art or painting. I was going to go to UAL. I was going to have this amazing time. And then I sat down and I thought about it, and I thought 4 years of painting. You know, it's not something that, when I thought about it, I was like, oh, that's not fun at all. And I was always interested in economics and marketing and different things like that, and selling to people and understanding consumer behavior and all of that. And I thought, why not go into this? And then going back to, you were talking about diversity, I think it's really important. I think it's gotten better, obviously, from the 90s and the whatever, but I think it's about starting the conversation, because people think, oh yeah, of course we're diverse, of course we have an Indian person in the office or whatever, but they tend to think, oh, we've got one, that's it.
That's our quota.
Yeah, we've got one, we're fine. We've got one African American person, we've got one English person, we've got one Asian person, and we're done. No one can complain, no one can call us racist, no one can call us this or that, because we've done it and we've filled our quota.
Yeah.
I think, of course, it's better to get more people involved. It's important, especially, like, people think that people with disabilities have almost nothing to offer society. I worked for a blind disabled charity last year.
Okay.
And the number of things that their members can do is incredible. Play basketball, play football, there's so many things. I think it's just about people being more open-minded and willing to accept that their opinion can be matched by someone of a different colour or race or something like that.
I think that's heartening to hear, because one of the best things about this business, from remembering when I got into it, is that it didn't matter which school you went to, whether or not you went to university, you could do anything in the creative department. And there were lots of very, very, sort of people who you wouldn't expect to be in an advertising agency, where they're writing ads and directing commercials and stuff, and it was very eclectic and it was very democratic, and the only rule was you've got to be good enough to be able to do it. That's all that matters. We don't care about anything else. That is the truism of the creative department, and we used to chuckle at it, because then you look at the client service and the planning guys in their suits and ties, and they'd generally be well-spoken, public school educated white chaps, and that's how it used to be. I don't know if it's still like that now, by the way. But that's the best thing, particularly in the creative bit, is all you've got to be able to do is come up with a great idea. Yeah. Nothing else matters. And I'm a progressive person, I'd like to think, but that's one tradition that I think the business has to hold on to. And long may it be so. So I'm heartened by what you just said. That was the only question I wanted to ask you, kind chaps.
That was it.
Well, we have one question which we sort of want to make a regular on when we have our guests on.
Yeah, great.
And basically, it's going back to your time in the industry and asking
the 1990s, VJ?
Well,
Are you trying to rub it in here?
The very early 2000s.
I'll take that.
We just wanted to know whether, if at all possible, could you sum up your career so far in 3 words or 3 short phrases?
Now he's got me, isn't he? Trapped on the wicket.
And
LBW.
And it's up to you whether you want to expand on it, or we'll leave it up to interpretation.
3 words. Sum up my career or my experience.
Either or.
1 has got to be exciting.
Right.
Because there's no doubt about it. This is an industry.
That was 5 words.
No, that's my first one. I'm qualifying word number 1. Exciting. There's no doubt. I spoke about it, and the word is it's exciting. It's very intoxicating. It's a fantastic business to get involved in, because it moves so quickly. You got to be on your game because someone's breathing down your neck. So exciting, number 1. Number 2 is frightening.
Frightening.
It is. What people forget is. I think sometimes people think, yeah, you go to work, you sit in a room with somebody and you come up with ideas all day and then it's really fun.
Yeah.
It is sometimes, but equally, every day you go in, you got to be doing something good.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're not on your game every day.
Sure.
But there's a deadline looming.
Yeah.
And it's very, very frightening. And what about if you come up with a script you thought was so stupid, the client then went and bought it, and then someone decided to pay £250,000 to get it shot, and there's a massive crew, and you turned up on day one and you're thinking, I can't believe that we're actually going to make this commercial. It's actually quite frightening, because it's your responsibility to now make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's frightening.
Yeah.
And then the second part of the frightening bit is that there's another half a dozen teams along the road, along the corridor from you in the agency, who want to work on the brief you're doing as well.
Right.
And the last brief they worked on, they absolutely nailed it.
Right.
That's frightening, because if you don't deliver, you're going to be out.
Right.
And then the third word I'd use to sum up my experience is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
The industry, as we said right at the top, has changed massively, and none more so than the last 5 years, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be able to turn around and say, is my approach to how I do my work, is that relevant to the clients I serve and the customers they serve?
Right.
Do I need to change something about how I think? Do I understand a new technology? Do I need to get to grips with digital, social, programmatic?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've written down here chatbots and artificial intelligence is going to be the big thing we've got to start thinking about.
Right.
And we've got to start thinking about it now. Okay? Because, and I heard someone say it at the conference just recently, copywriters are all of a sudden going to be in massive demand because they're going to need to start to write AI. Hey, that's you. Yeah. So all of a sudden, writers who, previously have sort of, since maybe Dave Trott's days, have taken a back seat because we're in a very visual culture. All of a sudden, with AI and chatbots,
We're back.
They're back with a bang. And so you've got to challenge yourself and think, I've really got to start to understand this thing everyone's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to change, you've got to think beyond the ad, which I wrote down earlier. That's so key, especially for people like me,
Mm-hmm.
essentially brought up in an analog world and had to change throughout their career. You've got to challenge yourself all the way through, or you just become irrelevant. I mean, I am way too old to be in the industry now. The average age is 31. I'm 45. I'm punching.
Just a number. Just a number. You look about 27. So.
I love this man. He's going to be my agent. So yeah,
Yes.
challenge yourself.
Right.
To understand, and just don't sit in that whole bubble about, I just write ads. You've got to think about other things. So exciting, frightening, challenging. Those are three things that I would sum up my lowly career with. How's that?
Brilliant.
Spot on. Again, massive thank you for joining us.
And
coming on the show.
of course, if there's anything last minute that you would like to plug, please,
do it now.
The floor is
Do it now.
yours. The floor is yours. Anything.
Well, I thank you. I will plug one event, if I may.
Of course.
And it is event on the 20th of October, 2016. And it is called Open Source.
I'm going to it.
We are.
Excellent,
Got a ticket,
excellent,
Got a ticket.
excellent. and it's a big tick for these chaps here. House points all around. So, if anyone listening wants to get to understand, the vibrancy and talent around Bournemouth, this is the event for you, because we want business owners, we want creatives, techies, students, academia. We want to all come together and start to learn and share and connect. So. Open Source.
Come on down.
We'd love to see
20th of
you.
October, and I have it here, 7 p.m.
Thank you very much. He's a good man. Canvas Bar Bournemouth.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. Thank you again.
Not at all.
And lovely speaking with you.
Yeah.
And we hope maybe in the future we'll be able to come back and talk to you again.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we will see you lot next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's a wrap.
Bye-bye.
Play outro music.
Da-da-da-da.